When you look at some of the potential market disruptors into next year, I was reading at note by Standard Chartered saying we could see oil at $20 if OPEC were to rupture. Is 2020 the key year where we could see this actually happen?
Well, that's a very interesting piece of sort of could, might, and maybe analysis. Yes, it could happen if we get a combination, for example, of further significant downgrades in demand because of the COVID-19 crisis is prolonged, and at the same time a breakdown of producer discipline on the side of the OPEC plus producers. But so far, that actually hasn't happened. Compliance with their agreement has actually been pretty good.
Okay, I like that. It could, might, and maybe. It seems very surveillance-like. Neil, when you look at OPEC, so it will meet on January the 4th to decide whether the market can take more oil after the 500,000 that it will add to the market next month. Could the market actually take that much oil?
Well, in the balances that we've published this morning, we've assumed as a scenario, not a forecast, that they will increase by 500,000 during the early part of 2021 each month. On that basis, and on the basis of no further deterioration in the demand outlook, stocks do actually draw in the first part of 2021, although not by very much. So I guess the message we're saying is there is not much headroom for them to supply more oil than they currently anticipate into the market. And it's also worth pointing out, by the way, that in the official communique, which was published at the end of the OPEC Plus meetings, they talked about this plus 500,000 barrels a day each month. But in one of the press conferences following, I think it was the Saudi minister, that said that could be 500,000 barrels a day plus or minus. So there is a suggestion that the implementation of the revised deal could be flexible. And indeed, we've praised the current deal as being flexible and sophisticated, and it shows that they are concerned about the short-term fragility of the market. They're recognizing it. That's why they've got this monthly procedure, which, as you say, they meet again for the first time on the 4th.
You know, other than Adam Szymanski and Paul Sankey teamed up at Deutsche Bank years ago, I don't know anybody who's pounded the spreadsheets of oil supply and demand like you have. Is your work with Platts, what you did at the IEA, whatever it is, all these different firms, and now at the International Energy Agency. How about a could, might, maybe question? Do you believe the spreadsheets? Do you believe the actual reported supply and demand integrity that we're modeling now for next year?
Well, you've hit on a very important point. I mean, I've been looking at these numbers on and off for very nearly 40 years. And there's been a huge improvement over that period of time in the quality and timeliness of data. Now, that's great. And for the OECD countries, for example, we have pretty good data. It could be better, but it's actually pretty good. The problem we have got is largely in the non-OECD world, where, for example, China. Now, the number we describe as demand for China is something that's actually derived from our assessments of net trade, refinery runs, domestic production. It's not an officially published figure such as we have for OECD countries. And the other big uncertainty we have is the level of reported oil stocks in China, which is also not an officially reported number. Now, before banging on too long about this, because as you can guess, you've hit on something here, we were in a meeting fairly recently where we pointed out that the number of countries that are reporting data to the Joint Oil Data Initiative, the JODI initiative, has fallen in the last 5 or 6 years from a relatively large number, 36 odd countries reporting data, now down to only about 14.
Wow.
So if anything, we have less transparency than we did have. And just a final point here, this is a factual point. There are 19 countries that are part of the OPEC Plus supply agreement. And the last time we looked, only 8 of them actually supply data regularly to the JODI initiative. So transparency is not what it could be. And I accept your premise at the beginning of this little segment that data transparency is not all it could be. And yes, the underlying picture could be different from what we're seeing, although, frankly, I don't believe directionally we're wrong. We called that correctly.